Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Kelly Paxton. Kelly is a pink-collar crime expert. Well, many of you may not know what that means, but really what she focuses on is fraud in smaller businesses, fraud on Main Street, not the big, grandiose fraud cases that you hear about, that make the news and whatnot. She focuses on working with smaller entities and smaller business owners to prevent, primarily embezzlement. Embezzlement, just inside these organizations. And it was just kind of fascinating listening to some of the stories and some of the things that she's seen over the years. I think it's great. She gets up and she speaks at these different events talking about fraud prevention, really in a more practical way, not a crazy auditing way. It's more practical. Hey, look, let's tighten the ship up a little bit. And, she's a podcaster as well. She has her podcast called Fraudish, which is really fascinating. I've listened to it a few times and listened to the different guests she brings on. But I think you'll enjoy some of the simple things that we talk about where fraud can occur, because I think most of us, put our head in the sand and we say, oh, it's never going to happen to us, or you just hope it doesn't. Let's put it that way. So anyhow, I really enjoyed my conversation with Kelly, and I hope you do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Another thing I like about this company is they do it all in-house. They take on these applications and build them into the platform using state-of-the-art Microsoft technology. No third-party bolt-ons for them. This is important because when you need technical assistance, they are the single point of contact. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. Well, hey, Kelly, welcome to Distribution Talk. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me.
It is an absolute honor to get to help to spread the word to stop fraud in your industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when you and I have talked, over the past, when I learned a little bit more about what you get into and where you go speak, I thought, oh my gosh, let's get this, let's bring you on Distribution Talk and let's talk a little bit about this. Because I know a lot of the listeners, something they don't think about very often. They don't think until they get burned. That's about when they start thinking about it. And that's the painful point. So if we could, let's talk a little bit about the background. How did you get involved with fraud? I mean, kind of an interesting niche. So, how did you fall into this?
So I say that my career has always been about money. My first career was I was a stockbroker and a bond trader, and we had a hinky client.
Gotcha.
And it turns out he was arrested for wire fraud. And this was back in the 90s. And so this is the one thing I always coach and mentor people who want to get into this industry of, detecting fraud, not committing fraud,
of course,
is pick up the phone, send an email, send a LinkedIn request. I called up the special agent at U.S. Customs and I said, hey, I knew that guy was dirty, but I want to do what you do. And fast forward a year and I'm in Georgia shooting guns and learning how to become a special agent for U.S. Customs. So I become a special agent for U.S. Customs. And because my financial background, they really wanted me to focus on money laundering, white collar crime. But I also arrested your typical bad guys, money launderers, drug dealers, pedophiles. Fast forward, my husband gets a job in the middle of the country. There's no border. I take a pause, a little bit of a mom pause. We come back to Oregon, where I'm originally from, and I start working at a sheriff's office. I am the certified fraud examiner, fraud analyst for the sheriff's office, and I'm doing embezzlement cases on Main Street. And this is one thing I really like to say is we don't identify with Bernie Madoff. We don't identify with Enron, but we identify with the trucking company that gets ripped off and can't give raises or, God forbid, shuts down. We identify with the soccer club that gets ripped off by, I call her Gladys, who's really smart, and people don't pay attention to what Gladys is doing. So it's fraud on Main Street that
Yeah.
everyone, and I'm going to ask you, Jason, do
Yeah.
you know someone who has been a victim of embezzlement?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. My family business. I mean, I remember years ago, a young lady opened in the accounts payable department, opened a credit card, and nobody really saw it. And since she was paying the bill, it went undetected for a very long time. But I mean, she took us for about 35,000, if I remember right. So
You got lucky.
yeah, we did. Yeah. Yeah. There could have been much worse. Absolutely.
So I specialize teaching and training about, I call it garden variety embezzlement. It's pink collar crime, and it's a real
Yeah.
term that I didn't come up with. Someone, criminologist, Dr. Kathleen Daly, came up with the term. It is a subset of white collar crime.
Okay.
And what it is the actual definition is low to medium level employees, comma, primarily women, comma, who steal from the workplace. And that's important. It is not women committing any crime. And, people think Marcia Clark was one example. She had a show on CBS called Pink Collar Crime. Only 2 out of 8 episodes were actually embezzlement. She made it about women committing any type of crime.
Oh, gotcha.
This is garden variety embezzlement. But if I had a business name saying garden variety embezzlement, no one would hire me. But they love my topic of catch me if you can, today's pink collar criminal. It's fun.
Right. Absolutely.
So any business, any geography can be the victim of embezzlement. And one thing you're going to learn is I am a fraud hashtag queen, like the queen. And I started it just because I wanted to keep track of what I was posting online.
Sure.
But one of my things is no victim shaming. I don't want victims to ever feel bad. And there is a caveat there. Elizabeth Holmes victims of Theranos, I can victim shame them all day long because they didn't do due diligence.
Right.
And just wanted to keep up with the really rich Joneses. I'm not going to victim shame because when you are a victim of embezzlement, your world is messed up because that woman, Gladys, or whatever the name of the woman who worked for your family business, you probably were friends with. You probably liked her. Money is replaceable. You can sell more widgets. You can, sell more time. But that trust, that breach of trust is really hurtful. I mean, I'm not going to ask you the name of her, but I bet you can remember a lot of specific examples of her. And you're going, she lied to me. Like these people lie to you day in, day out for a long time. And you're like, but how did I not see it?
Yeah.
So I don't ever want to victim shame.
Right. No, and that makes good sense. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you think back, obviously, after the incident, you're like, oh, yeah, there was that one. And then, aha. Yeah. And so, yes, I mean, I think the other thing, Kelly, is, I think we go into these relationships with associates in companies with all the best intentions. We go in and I'll trust you, especially if you've been with us a little bit and you're in a position where you have a lot of opportunity, if you will. You have a lot of responsibility and opportunity. And I think we go in with the best intention. We think that this person is not going to, have any malcontent or, malfeasance. And then it happens. You're like, man. But then you do realize some of the things that, there was a flag there. Might have not been red, but it was yellow for sure.
Pink. It's a pink flag.
It was a pink flag. Okay, fair enough.
That's like, we're not going to victim shame. And you know what? I will say there is always a silver lining, whether you are the victim or the perpetrator. Because I have victims who have, because this happened, have really kind of, some of them have returned better focus to the business.
For sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Once you get stung, I think you definitely, realize that, if this is happening here, maybe there's some other places I need to, tighten up.
Right. And we hire people we know, like, and trust. So we're not going to hire that bad guy who's all tatted up and, drives a low rider. And, I know in our neighborhood, if we see that guy, we're going to be on high alert. But when we see Gladys walking her cute little, Frenchie, we're going to think, oh, but then when you think about it, it's like, how did Gladys spend $5,000 on a Frenchie when I only pay her X per hour? And like, she's driving a nice new Range Rover. Like, right. So there are clues. But again, trust but verify. We need to trust but verify. And you guys can't see this, but I'm showing Jason my favorite I have a fraud museum of all sorts of things. You know what? If you only look at checks, say over $5,000 or accounts payable over $5,000, you know what? Pull one for $500 because Gladys doesn't steal $750,000 in one check.
Yep.
Gladys does it over time, and it'll hockey stick up.
Yeah.
But if Gladys thinks you're paying attention, Gladys is going to be like, oh, which goes to, and we've had, like, you know, Jason and I, we've had the pleasure of being able to hang out socially.
Yes.
Culture, tone at the top.
Yeah.
It's really important. And I hate to say it, but a lot of times Gladys is in the basement, not paid well. She sees the business owner driving in a nice new Range Rover.
Right.
His or her spouse comes to work and, like, you know, oh, when are we going to Key West next? And then they come back, they hand the Black American Express bill to Gladys. That's
Right.
$20,000.
Right.
And Gladys is like, well, hey, I know you took the kids and, you know, your wife or your spouse. How do you want me to break this out? And the business owner is like, Gladys, you know what?
Let it slide. Yeah. Let her slide. Yeah.
And Gladys can't even pay for her kid to go to outdoor school that's $200. And Gladys knows you've ripped off the government.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Kelly. I mean, and I think that, you know, a lot of times, I'm sure my family's going to kill me for this. You know, we played it fast and loose in certain areas, and you know, we can't quite get away with that anymore. My brother does not get away with that anymore. But you know, but again, going back several years, I mean, that was something that I saw forever. I mean, and yeah, it makes perfect sense. You know, it's interesting. I want to go back to one point you made about the smaller embezzlement. So, you know, one of the things that always kind of puzzled me that my father used to do is he would review payments and he'd want to look at the checks that were going out under, I think it was, God, maybe it was under 2,500, maybe it was under $5,000 if I remember right. It's interesting because, you know, I think, well, all the other business owners are looking at the big checks. You know, they're looking at those big checks and they're wanting to sign the big checks, and things under a certain amount of money, they would, you know, just kind of pass on. They'd stamp it with their signature and call it good. My father was very diligent. He wanted to look at the small stuff. And I always wondered, I didn't really understand why until he explained it to me. And it's exactly as you're saying, that you're not going to get ripped off typically in the very big checks. It's going to be the small stuff and the small account, or we've opened up an account with this. I remember specifically, I got a phone call. I was the branch manager in this Denver location, and we had an account with a company called, was it the Stake Company? Now, these were wooden stakes for construction, and it was spelled STAKE, but I got a phone call. It's like, hey, what is this? You know, because it is relatively small amounts, but it was just, you know, that diligence looking at the smaller and the ones that had a questionable name associated with it, you know, and it was all on the up and up, but those were the things he looked at.
Yeah. And so, you know, we're talking distribution network, and a lot of times people are going to think inventory.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've listened to some of your podcasts, and
Sure.
you talk a lot about inventory and inventory control and, you know, getting stuff on demand and not having excess inventory.
Yes.
But in your industry, there's a lot of money moving.
Right.
There's a lot of vendors.
Right.
Like
right.
the person who inputs the vendor,
Mm-hmm.
who is that that's inputting the new vendors? Like, who's in charge of inputting? And so you could have the Stake Company.
Yes.
And you know what? You could have Gladys open a bank account that is like STEAK, Stakes by Gladys. And who's going to catch it?
Right.
Unless you're looking.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
And when you have so many vendors, you're kind of like, you know, I mean, and I get the question a lot. Doesn't the bank pay attention to the check that's being deposited? No, especially not through an ATM.
Yeah.
Now, the world has changed and we're doing a lot of things online, a lot more things online, but still, banks don't check like people think they do. And then people are like, well, if the bank let that money go to Gladys, I'm going to sue the bank. You've got 30 days and that's it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. A lot of folks don't know that. Yeah. And I think that you're right. People do rely on that outside source to, you know, to monitor this a lot better, and feel like we've really, you know, got to get some better checks and balances in place in order for this to protect ourselves just a little bit better. Especially, it makes great sense about the inventory and opening a new supplier.
Yeah.
Who's going to know? You know, it's like, and especially if you make it sound like it's, you know, industry related, you know, and if you make it sound really close to what you should be doing. And that's just a really easy opportunity, because at that point, let's say that the accounts payable person just opens up the supplier, or maybe it's, you know, it could be somebody working in the purchasing department and things like that, you know, opens up a new supplier. There's all kinds of places to play there. And as you said, so much money is moving fast. I mean, fast and furious. It is a high transactional industry.
Well, and so this is interesting because, like, okay, so I'm saying Gladys, but there are
Yeah.
differences between men and women when they embezzle. Women steal more often.
Okay.
However, they steal less money. So if you get an embezzler, you're going to hope she's a woman.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But then the other thing is you've got to think about one of my hashtags is it's position, not gender. So if you have someone that's in procurement,
Yes.
which is more likely to be males, they are going to do more vendor fraud
Okay. Okay.
than women. Women are going to do more, forgery, like checks,
Interesting.
because they're in that sort of position. Now, for some of the bigger companies out there that say have a CFO,
Yeah.
it's kind of a joke. Like, does the CFO even know how to do a journal entry? Or does he call down to Gladys or John and say, hey, we need a journal entry?
Right. Right.
And I just saw a colleague of mine just posted online about CFOs not knowing if they can trust the numbers that they're watching because they're not putting them
Interesting.
in.
Yeah.
It's Gladys or John that's putting them in.
Right. Or you have a controller or somebody like that that's doing that type of work. No, that's a great point. I think sometimes CFOs, and again, I have a lot of friends that are CFOs, but they're often being pressured to look at the growth of the company and acquisition strategies, and are we positioning ourselves in a cash position to grow?
Yeah, they're forecasting.
Right. They're looking forward and not necessarily always looking at the present and maybe the recent past.
Yeah, they're not down in the weeds.
Right.
Gladys and John are in the weeds. They know every dollar that goes in and every dollar that goes out. And back to the sort of vacation example, Gladys or John do not know if at the end of the year the owner takes an owner's draw to make up for the vacation to Key West.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know it. But again, this goes to culture and tone at the top. I have only had one victim of embezzlement say, I never liked her. And he's like, and I never gave her access to my checkbook. And I'm like, yeah, but you gave her access to your Visa card.
Right.
And
right.
everyone else has liked the person who ended up breaching them. And that's the other thing is like life throws us a loop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, COVID, if anything, showed us that, so Gladys or whoever it is can be going along and everything is fine. But then all of a sudden, their kid gets sick, their
Right.
parent gets sick,
Right.
their spouse leaves them, and that salary no longer is going to make it. And they all think they're going to pay it back.
Mm-hmm.
They all think they're going to pay it back. A lot of them, I mean, I pull out a drawer here, is like, I can see that they have a spreadsheet of what they've taken.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's insidious. I mean, that's just crazy. But yeah. I can see it. Yeah.
They don't see themselves as a criminal.
Right.
And so this is like, I teach a class on fraud and pop culture because everyone loves fraud. I mean, you've seen it, people talking to me about fraud. It's like, oh, tell me your story.
Yeah. Give me one of the dirty ones. Yeah. I'm looking for it. Right.
Yeah. So we just passed the holiday season, fruitcakes. There's a company in Texas called Collins Street Bakery. They sell fruitcakes. They got ripped off $17 million.
Oh.
And if you put it in the show notes, I'll give you the link. They have a blog post. There was a woman who was on my podcast, Fraudish, who did a documentary about the theft. And I want to give a huge shout out to anyone who catches someone who steals, who goes to law enforcement. Because you know what? The statistic is, and it's a really hard statistic, only 15% of embezzlement cases get turned over to law enforcement.
Absolutely agree.
Not to pick on you, but did your business turn this woman into law enforcement, or did you just kick her to the curb and say, I don't ever want to see you again?
Something to that effect, yes.
Yeah.
Again, it's been an awful long time ago, but yeah, I don't recall law enforcement being called. I think more around the banking. If I remember right, the bank was notified and they were supposed to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's the best of my recollection. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can give you the link for the movie, but also the blog post, because it's over a century-old business and they start losing money. And actually, the guy who stole it, his name was Sandy Jenkins. They never expected it from him. And he's like, I'm not a criminal. I stole once, but I'm going to go back to being a good guy. These people, they don't grow up with in the criminal element.
Right.
They don't have friends in prison or in jail. And so when their world comes crashing down, another thing is they will confess. And whatever number they confess to, if you had asked the woman, she would have said, 10,000.
Right.
Take that number that they confess to and multiply it by 2 to 6.
Wow.
That's the real number.
Yeah.
they round down. And I know, I know Jason's wife, and I'm going to tell you that when she goes to the Nordstrom's anniversary sale and you're like, hey, honey, what'd you spend? She's rounding down.
Rounding
And
down.
that's what
Fair
happens when
enough.
people
Yeah.
steal. They round
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Hey, one thing I wanted to ask about. So we've talked about AP and we've talked about, purchasing. What about accounts receivable? Where do you see? I mean, I had one story where I had a knucklehead outside salesperson who he was collecting checks from the customer, this contractor. He would collect the checks. The contractor would say, "Oh, here, why don't you just take it? I'll save a stamp." Okay, so he would take it, and it would have our company name. He wrote a slash and then he wrote his name after that. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, that's just stupid. But, he was able to take it to the bank and cash it because his girlfriend was a teller at this particular institution. And obviously they got caught, in short order. But that's just one example of accounts receivable. What else should we be looking for? I mean, that guy, yeah, not the brightest bulb on Broadway, but he just, that was an interesting one.
This is a fun fraud fact, and I'm
Okay.
going to say everyone in your audience practices good dental hygiene. 3 out of 5 dentists get ripped off by Gladys.
Interesting. Why are service providers like that or medical providers like that? Why are they so susceptible?
Well, first off, you're not going to go to a dentist who is profitable. You're going to go to someone who gives you like the right amount of Novocaine.
Mm-hmm.
They give your kid a sucker on the way out, and you realize that so they'll get a cavity and they'll come back into the office 6 months later. No. They make a decent amount of money, but you know what? A lot of people, and I was talking to a friend of mine, they don't realize that some people pay cash at the dentist.
Yeah.
So this is another thing that I think that, your audience will appreciate is you and I, we pay our bills, I'm going to say online.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
yeah, absolutely.
there is a huge part of the population that is unbanked.
Interesting. Did not know that.
And so we don't think about how unbanked people deal with stuff. So one of my first cases was a water district. And I'm like, how'd they steal the checks? There's a lot of people who go in and pay cash or take money orders because they're unbanked. So we have to think about how other people live, not how we live.
Right.
Because we live regular sort of lives. But maybe in the distribution network that not everyone is banked. I mean, my kid's orthodontist, she was a good orthodontist. And she goes, when I started this business, I had no idea I was going to get cash.
Right.
But we lived in a kind of rural area and there were a lot of migrant workers and they will get their kids' teeth fixed no matter what. And they're going to come in with cash. And she said, at any given time, I have $5,000 to $10,000 of cash in my drawer because they don't have insurance.
Right.
Especially not dental insurance. I mean, I don't have dental
insurance. I don't
insurance.
either. Yeah, I don't pay for that either.
And you know what? I went to my dentist because my kid had a big dental bill. And I was like, if I pay cash, do I get a discount? She's like, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I come in with a wad of cash. She could have deleted the treatment and the dentist would have never known. So in your case, that guy could have gone in. That's why, there's an audit trail.
Yeah.
If you ever see deleted transactions, that's a clue.
Great point. Yeah. Great point.
Who gets to delete the transactions? Is there an internal control that only certain people get to delete the transactions? So I kind of joke that it's not surgery to stop this.
Yeah.
To prevent it, it takes internal controls. So we have the fraud triangle, which is opportunity, pressure, and rationalization. The easiest thing to control for is opportunity. You know what? If you have someone in your warehouse and, I'm going to say that he's got a gambling habit, 1 out of 4 cases of embezzlement. And this is, again, a hard number to prove. They say there's a gambling connection.
Oh, I've got it. Yeah. I've got a recollection of that one. Yeah, I know that one. I can put a name on this guy. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I actually just taught a class last week in Texas online. And there was a kid, he goes, what do you think about online gambling? And I said, well, it's growing. And I think it's going to be a really big issue. And it's the one sort of addiction that we don't like. If someone has a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, we can see it in their behaviors. But gambling addictions, we can't see it. We really can't see it.
Yeah.
So say that, Joe in the warehouse has a gambling addiction and, what's he going to do? He's going to say that you pay me $1 million a year, which is way too much money for Joe.
Yeah.
But he's got a $2 million a year lifestyle because he goes to Vegas every weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember,
Yeah.
Kelly, this is back, when the name kind of popped up, it was a video poker thing. And that's when video poker was really starting to get prevalent, especially where we live. And yeah, this was a field salesperson who he had a bunch of demo product, with him all the time. He was issued all this demo product. And all of a sudden, he just started pawning it to pay for his video gaming habit. And I remember my brother having to literally go around to all these pawn shops and collect all of our, go get our stuff back. But yeah, I think again, it's this just the justification thing that you mentioned. I mean, I think that's really powerful here. In you don't pay me enough. That's one, especially kind of going back to something we talked about a little earlier, is seeing the fancy car, the nice car, some of the vacations that the owner of the company or direct management are taking, and I'm going to augment my income. I'm going to supplement I deserve this.
Yep.
I deserve this, and and I think then it snowballs. It just kind of gets away from them.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I don't want to get out of bed in the morning thinking everyone's naughty.
Yeah.
I want to get out of bed, think that people are generally good. And sometimes something bad or something they don't think they can handle happens to them. And the thing is like, I'm really into behavioral science, but
Mhm.
we have this system 1 and system 2 thinking.
Mhm.
System 1 is, 2 plus 2 is 4. I call it the Homer Simpson thinking.
Right.
System
Right.
2 is slower and it's more ethical. Everyone thinks that money solves problems. It does in the short term for sure. But, you stealing money might solve it for this month. But then next month, like basically you need to get on a budget and you need to learn to. So money is a quick fix for people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. And so, I mean, I think you've got some really, clear examples, clear places where, people in the distribution world can be, can be taken. But I guess, one of the questions I have is as we start to move into some different technologies, we see, of course, AI blossoming last year. I mean, just everybody finally learned about AI, back in January of last year. With the advent of ChatGPT, but how is AI going to either deter fraud or is it going to create more opportunity, if you will?
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are like, I can't afford to hire one of the big four, McKinsey, to come in and consult and
Right.
tell me, I'm just going to get an AI solution.
Sure.
And I think they're going to think that it's going to be able to stop fraud. But really, who is programming the AI?
Mm-hmm.
And do they know your business?
Mm-hmm.
And the person that is stealing, never underestimate Gladys.
No,
Gladys is smart.
Gladys is smart. I would agree with that. Absolutely.
And maybe you do have a company coming in and saying, hey, we're going to be able to, look at your AR and AP and we're going to be able to make sure that everything is going right. Well, Gladys is going to sit there and go, oh, that account there, that's just an owner account. We're not going to. And is the consultant actually going to know that that is what it is?
No.
So I think people are going to think that AI is going to solve everything, but it isn't. Again, you have to pay attention to your business. And one of the easiest things, and this is a little dated, is a colleague of mine who stole from his, bookkeeping clients. He's like, you got to mail your bank statement home. Now that's dated. You have to be the first one to get to your bank statement. Don't ask your office, manager, hey, can you download my bank statement? Because I don't really, I forgot my password and
I just don't want to deal with this. Yeah.
So they bring it to you and you don't realize they've quickly gone on to, a software and they've turned $10,000 into, 10 million. And you're like, oh yeah, this is good. I got my $10 million when it's really 10,000. So you need to, and it's not victim shaming, but it is like surprise and delight, paying attention. If you have auditors, mix up the time. Like if they always come in June, have them come in October. And remember, audit is a sample. It is only a sample. And a lot of times they're only going to sample things that they think are material.
Right. Oh, absolutely, Kelly. I mean, I think about when I think of audits, sometimes I'll think more of inventory audits, for example, and CPA coming in doing an inventory audit. And I kind of laugh when I tell people, it's like, look, they're only looking at the 30 most or highest cost of goods sold items. And you know what? You just go make sure those are dead nuts on and you get this, stamp of approval. You're awesome. And the rest of the inventory is in shambles. But man, those 30 items, and they're dead nuts on. So you're right. It's a very small selective sample size and can be, and you can fake that. I mean, you can fake anything if it's that small a sample size.
Especially if you know they're coming, June 1st every year.
I know exactly when they're coming. I'll take about 3 or 4 days to get dead nuts on. I mean, yeah, I can make really great, I can look really squeaky clean
Yep.
at that point. But, you kind of brought up, just kind of jogged my memory. One of the things that you and I have talked about before, and this is just, again, this is one of those old school advice, is make financial people take 2 weeks of vacation consecutively. So could you expand on that a little bit? You know that better than I do.
So there was a woman named Bernice Geiger who stole from her dad's own bank in Sheldon, Iowa for 40 years. In today's dollars, it would be about $17 million. She could never take a vacation. Why? Because she never knew when the auditors were coming in.
Right.
So she had 2 sets of books. She goes to prison for 5 years. She gets divorced, of course. She moves back in with her family, which is shocking because her dad had to literally close the bank. And the sort of urban myth is, and I think it's true because I got it from Free Economics, is that she went and she consulted for the precursor to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And she looked for people who weren't taking vacations. Because why aren't they taking vacations? And, these micro quick trips to like Vegas or Disney, they don't count. 2 weeks, like if you're gone for 2 or 3 days, no one's going to do your work.
No.
But if you're gone for 2 weeks, someone's got to do your work.
Right. Right.
So if someone isn't taking a vacation, wonder why.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, and you when this was shared, this was shared with me years and years ago, but it all of a sudden made sense. It's like, okay, nobody can keep a fraudulent gig going if they're out for 2 weeks. They have to be able to be there to make sure that things are flowing, the way they need.
Yeah.
So once somebody has to step in and do your job, they might just catch something. And I think that's really how most of the incidents that I've seen personally, have been caught, is that somebody had to, fill in, and all of a sudden it was, that's when the flags went up. It's like, well, something's not right here. And that's what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many cases where it's like they get a phone call, like, I just got my statement and I don't see my $200 cash payment on it. And it starts, like, wow, what?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in Oregon, mystery shopping, apparently you have to be a private investigator, which I am. It's not that way in every state. But I had a client who actually couldn't afford us because, unfortunately, I'm not cheap. But he had a business with a friend. He was the silent partner. Their operating agreement was such that they would never take cash.
Okay.
That was the agreement. It was a auto repair business, let's just say.
Okay.
And he couldn't afford us to come in and, go through all the books and everything. And he goes, I know he's taking cash. And I was like, dude, this is what you need to do. You need to find a friend who doesn't know that he's your friend. Come in, do whatever you need to have done to a car, and try and pay cash. And if your business partner takes cash, bingo. And he's like, oh my God, that's genius. And I'm like, well, it's not genius, but you can't afford us. And I want you to, he was really struggling because he didn't have time or the resources to go in and do like a forensic accounting, but he was pretty sure this guy was taking cash. I said, so just have a friend of yours come in and try and pay in cash. And if he does, he's been taking cash.
Sure.
And then you confront him. Yeah. So there's different ways to, I don't want to say skin a cat, but skin a cat.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's different ways. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and even if you can't afford to have, someone like you come in, there are just some simple tricks and things to, if you want to catch these things. Yeah. One thing before I let you go, I want to talk, you wrote a book a few years ago. It's about 3 years ago that came out, or?
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah. And in this book, tell me a little bit about it. Did this have a little bit of some of the things that we've been talking about, and some of the tricks and things like that?
Yeah. So it's called Embezzlement: How to Detect, Prevent, and Investigate Pink Collar Crime, because we have search engine optimization, and I couldn't do a book called Pink Collar Crime because no one would search for it.
You got to start with embezzlement, go big, and then kind of work from there.
That's the other thing I kind of joke about. Embezzlement and fraud is a little bit like porn. Like, you're not going to walk into Barnes and Noble and say, I've been ripped off.
Right.
Like, where's the books about being ripped off? You're going to go online and you're going to go, I've been embezzled, and I'm going to pop up.
Yeah.
So the book, and it's so funny. My daughter's living in Australia, and I told her I want to start my second book, and it's going to be a little bit different. And I said, I met with the editor and I'm going to start my second book. And she goes, oh, you mean your pamphlet? Because my daughter calls it a pamphlet. And I'm like, it's over 100 pages. It's not a pamphlet. But it's got stories of different industries, how it happens. It's like a quick afternoon read. And it's fun. Like a good colleague of mine, he makes his forensic accounting class in Texas read it every semester. Like it's just a kind of how-to guide, not how to steal, even though I could teach that. But I'm not going to teach
That's
that.
a good
But
idea.
You're gonna go online and you're gonna search it. That's why I joke it's kind of like porn, because you're not gonna walk into your office with a big book that says embezzlement.
Right.
How to stop it.
This is something, because it's a little shameful having to, to go look for this. And you're not going to get it just for giggles. You're thinking, I need this because I think I got a problem. So
right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, we'll make sure, that it's linked in the show notes and, to your daughter. It's like, hey, wait a minute. There are so many self-aggrandizing business books out there that I think 100 pages is really good. I don't need the 250-page version. I need the 100. Just tell me what I need to know version.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I appreciate that. Well, Kelly, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. And where can somebody find you if they want to reach out to you all and think about, maybe I do need a pretty serious look-see. How could somebody find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Kelly Paxton, Paxton.
Yep.
Also, if you Google pink collar crime or just put pinkcollarcrime.com, you will find me. Yeah. So I'm all over the internet.
And you've got your podcast and you've got all kinds of fun stuff. So
yeah, my podcast of Fraudish. And Fraudish is actually great because I have perpetrators of embezzlement, I have victims of embezzlement, and I also have fraud professionals.
Yes.
The thing I love to do is connect people in the industry, whether they've been a victim, whether they need defense attorney. I'm the fraud connector. That's what I really take joy in, is teaching people what to do when you're concerned.
Gotcha. Well, hey, once again, I really appreciate this. This has been fun. I love hearing about this stuff. It's extremely interesting to me. And, I'm looking forward to the next episode on your podcast.
Awesome. It's an honor. Thank you so much, Jason.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.